So for your first problem set, the Cyberchase. I realized this after I had recorded attendance for week 4, is that there is a holiday on Monday, which means things always get moved to the next day. So just know, even on Monday, I will probably be grading. So if you're submitting over the weekend, it's always great to get a review. Remember, if you want my review, it has to be in first thing in the morning because that's when I grade. Okay, so let's look at this because the problem set that you're going to do, Cyberchase that we got introduced to in the attendance, right? And we've now been introduced to the new problem, to the new process, the POE, the proof of effort process. This is the setup we're going to go through as far as the folder and files. Shouldn't be a big surprise here. And matter of fact, I already have mine set up just to show you. So I created that p1-q.sql file. I copied it from the a-q. I modified it to output to the right proof of work file. I also updated this so that when I was ready to run my proof of work, it was updated as well. One thing I do is just to make sure everything's good, looking good, is I just put, testing setup just to make sure everything's there. And then as an example, I could delete this, right? Delete this file and then run it again. So I could come over here and I could look at it and I could go, okay, and then I could go look and first, did it create the file that I'm looking for, right? And did it have just this test in it? Now, if I do that, right, then I would, get rid of because you'll end up putting some content in here later, right? And then you could delete this file. You could just, go in and say delete permanently. Okay, that's just one of the ways I do it to make sure everything's set up. Okay, so now in your README file, which I did play with a little bit before I started, right? So this is, I ended up, and I kind of recommend you do this too, is put this at the top. So problem set 0, 1 through 7, and then for each problem, right, you'll have your attempts. And I just started, because one thing I noticed when I ran the SQLite, I forgot to put the DB. I was just hitting enter too quickly, and so I had to get out. But in this case, what I would expect to see is what I showed you when you were actually doing writing your attempts. Okay. And then also here, sorry, those are the backticks, right? So I also ended up just creating one of these and copy them for each one. That way they were already there. And then I have my blank line to start on my next one. And so when it says do this, that's what I did. And I have my normal 2 sessions started. And this is what I was just showing you, right? And then use your terminal to write your attempts to get the correct output for the problem. Now, the nice thing is, you do have, down here at the bottom, I'll show you in a minute, that there is a test that will tell you. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and scroll down here. So we'll go over the rest of this in a minute, but what you will see is how to test is how many columns and rows you would expect back. And I have you just, in this case, do a count of each. And that's pretty easy to return. Now I call it, it's the rows itself, right? Because it doesn't, we could actually count the columns, I'm sure, but in this case you just count the rows that return. So you'll have 2 queries for each one. But I jumped over this, so let's scroll back up. Okay, so in this case, you should have several attempts, right? So this is where your proof of effort, and that comes down to about 30 points of your overall grade, so make sure you do it. And the other thing is, today I realized something is that when you're in the SQLite, if you do, and just know, don't do this until you have your proof of work. Because when you do this, I did this by accident yesterday, it clears your history. So you can't roll up and look at what you've done. So if your terminal for your SQLite gets kind of busy, don't clear shell.clear because it clears your history until you've captured all that proof of effort stuff. Okay. Now, once you have the correct output, refer back to this, right? So you complete the POE. Now, here's the thing that I talked about in the attendance. For each problem, you also need a second query that does a count to confirm you are getting the correct output. And that's really just for you to count, to have that reassurance that you did get it. So this is actually going over what you do for each problem, right? So what you want to do here, then, I'm only showing you for problem 1, and then you do problem 2 and so forth, okay? So this is the process you will go through, right? You complete the proof of work. Now, in this case, you've completed the proof of effort as you've gone through. And I showed you when I was doing it yesterday when I recorded the attendance, I kind of captured as I go through. Like if I was really working on this one, I definitely have whatever other attempts I've done there. I'm just kind of giving you one of the things you could get started with to help, to help you kind of think, what would my effort? Well, I tried to get in there. I was in the wrong one, right? I didn't do dot tables. There are just some stuff in there you can do. But of course, as you go along, what I expect to see is more just the attempts that you made. Okay, so that's for every problem. So this is directly from the CS50 site. You can go and look at it. It describes each of the columns, what they are, and these come in really handy when you're doing each query, okay? So now the specifications for each of the following, and I call them problems, questions, is what they refer to them as. You have a single SQL statement, right? You should not assume anything about the IDs of any particular episode. That's good. That's kind of a hint, right? Should be accurate, and your query should be accurate even if the ID is different. Yes, okay. Finally, each query should return only the data necessary to answer the question. In other words, if it asks for a specific column, then it should only return that when it's asking for, right? List of number of titles, right? The production code, right? So find the title. So when and in the test, it actually shows you how many columns you should be returning. So there's a lot of good hints in there. Okay. All right. So now here's the stuff. Now optional now. So this is now back to our content, right? So this is the end of the CS50. Again, you can go look at it. There is an AI duck on CS50. If you want to sign up for that, it actually does answer questions as you're trying to walk through things. It does not give you the answer, but it will answer if you have a general question. So what I mean by that is if you come over here, and that's actually something you can definitely add, and I would add into if you do sign up for the AI duck. I've done it in the past where I've actually had to log in and authorize it. And when I've done that, let's see if I'm still authorized. Oh yeah, I'm still in there. Okay, so this right here, if you ask too many questions too quickly, these hearts go down. And what that is trying to do is help you kind of stop and ask yourself, hey, you need to actually be thinking about it. Okay, that's what that's for. Now back here. Okay, so if you finish 1 through 3, you can take a break. Okay, so again, we're at a holiday, so this would be that night for Tuesday night, right? You can submit your commit history for the Cyberchase folder, and then you can complete the rest of them by the next due date, which is Thursday. Now, it's really important that you include indicating you're taking a break. Oh, actually, I'm going to fix that. Actually, just in your comments. So if you submit the commit history, then in your comments, in Canvas. And I'm glad I read that. I'm sorry I missed that. But include in your comment in Canvas that you're taking a break, because else I'll assume it's just complete. Okay. Now, of course, I can look, but I just want you to communicate, right? So if you finish early, you'd like me to review the work again. So you actually end up getting, depending on your submission time, 2 reviews. Okay. All right, so your commit history for the Cyberchase, and by the way, the Cyberchase also you get points for having it in the right location here. And if you'll please pay attention to that, I already covered it in attendance in here. Do you have all the required commits, and do the commits contain the workflow output for the proof of effort, the proof of work, and the correct commit messages? Okay, sorry, proof of work and the correct commit messages. There's 7 problems, and because you have to write 2 queries for each problem, there will turn out to be 150. Sorry, 450. Where did I get that from? Actually, in this case, I'm going to look at something in a minute, because I actually did run the proof of work. The POW file actually ends up to be about 153 lines long. I should put this in here in addition. Okay, so that's all the other thing I'll look for, right? And so 14 queries once you've finished, right? So again, make sure you're following that process of your commits, and that's what I say here. Each commit from a column needs to include your POE in your README file, your query, so 2 queries should show up in your commit for each problem, right? And then the updates to the proof of work. Okay, that's hopefully going to be helpful to work through this. And then what our review will be focused on is taking the data set for Cyberchase, and we'll do even more queries. All right, reach out if you need help.